Hello everybody and welcome to another Alternative Interactions. I'm Gary. So first of all, thank you very much for all the support, and please do like, share and subscribe. It helps my channel grow and allows me then to put out more and more content, which will be a wonderful thing. So thank you very much. This kind of comes from a viewer's question and something that's been asked already, and that's fundamentally the nature of our reality, what we live in, or what we live in, what is it, where are we as such. And so I'd like just to give you a little breakdown of my journey to get to where we've got to, and I will also be trying to simplify as much as possible some of the physics that I've learned along the way to try and understand this. So there's not only the kind of watching somebody and trying to figure out, but there's also physics or quantum mechanics fundamentally, which is just a posh word, to show these kind of things. And there's a couple of experiments and such like. Now I will put a link at the bottom of my channel for the double slot or double slit experiment. It's in the cartoon form, and although it's a cartoon, the information is bang on correct. It's just an easier way of kind of understanding it. There are some very, very deep scientific versions of it, but they fundamentally say exactly the same thing as the version I share, and it's only about 5 minutes long. You may need to watch it a few times like I did to really understand it, but hopefully with what I tell you, or my experience or my understanding, that'll hopefully help you get your head round this. So to first take the journey of trying to figure out what we live in or on, I first had to do some work on myself to get to the stage where I had to understand and really get the fact that everything I'd ever been taught or told, particularly in school, was a lie. And that was quite a hard one to get my head round initially, as I'm sure it is with most of you guys. It's very tricky. We then have to go through the stages of cognitive dissonance and Stockholm syndrome, in breaking down the layers of the onion in our head, the programming, to a stage where we're able to actually look at something without getting triggered. Now, that took me a long time, I can assure you, to actually try and unlearn everything you've ever been taught or told, and then relearn something afresh with new eyes is a very tricky thing, and something that we constantly always work on and at, even to this day. The work's never done. You can never say, oh, I'm there now, because you just aren't. And the one thing I have learned from this journey is the more I've come across and the more I learn, the more I realise how little I actually know. So yeah, just be mindful of some of the things I might talk about might trigger you, or you might question. You get that feeling, this is part of the program, and you need to recognise those emotional outbursts or feelings for what they really are. And this is another good way of breaking the mental chains of our fundamental enslavement in this realm. So I first started kind of looking at flat Earth, I guess, after a few years of doing research and all sorts of bits and pieces, all sorts of projects and such like. But flat Earth came across me, but I didn't understand or realise I was actually looking at flat Earth at the time. So the first video we saw, I mean, none of these videos, or most of these videos, don't exist anymore on YouTube. They've all been taken down. So we're talking 2015-ish, something like that. Maybe 2014, 2015, something like that. Yeah, probably 2015. So the first video I saw was this, had no description, nothing. It was just a time-lapse photography of the sun coming up and setting. That was it. I was like, so that video was watched a lot of times, trying to figure out what on earth was what's the significance of this. I mean, all we can see is the sun coming up and going down. You know, so what does this mean? But instinctively in the back of my head, someone was saying, "You got to figure this out. You got to figure this out." You know, it was like one of these little puzzle things, or you get addicted to it and you just can't work it out. And in the end, what was noticeable was the sun came up, and as it came up and got to midpoint, it got bigger, and then it started to shrink again as it went away. And that didn't make sense. So I then came across another video where these guys had this laser. I think it was on the Great Lake. So I think it's from memory Chicago on one side. And they fired this laser across 10-12 miles of water, just above sort of like water level. And the catch was Stephen Hawkins is a liar. And I was like, Stephen Hawkins isn't a liar. He's amazing. He's the best scientist ever, and he's mathematical genius. And how can these guys even dare say that? So a bit of clickbait, obviously. I clicked on it, and this laser shone across the lake 10 miles or so without disappearing into the curvature like it should have. And at the time, again, I didn't realise this, and then they started talking about the math. Math always has to come into it at some stage, and they explained the curvature ratio of what Stephen Hawkins had worked out, and the experiment they had just done proved that there was no curvature in water. And that one took a long while to figure out, because again, it's, you know, that they must be wrong. Even though I've seen what I've seen, they must be wrong. There's something going on. I can't get my head around it. And obviously this went on for probably about a year, 18 months. I mean, it wasn't a quick process, not by any means. It wasn't like a hallelujah moment. It was difficult. Looking at all sorts of kind of flat earthy type things, really. And slowly building up an idea of what was potentially what it was. Now, interestingly enough, recently, somebody asked me about what shape it is, and I said to them, well, you know, you've got access to a school teacher, a teacher in the UK. I said, ask them if water can bend. And so they asked this teacher if water could bend, and they said, no, don't be silly, water's flat. Big bodies of water are flat. So they came back to me and said, well, they said the water's flat. I said, okay, yeah, that's been proven. I've seen that experiment with a laser. And so I said, so make a ball where 74% of this cardboard box is flat, and you can make a ball out of it, but only, you know, the rest is land, so you can wet the cardboard in the shape of the land, as to the map, but you've got to make sure that at least 75, 74-ish% is, those kind of ratios. And they weren't correct in their ratios, obviously, but I said turn it into a ball, and obviously they couldn't, because you can't make 75% of anything that's flat into a ball. It would have to be the other way round. It'd have to be all in the curvature. Now, I'm not telling you that the earth is flat, and I'm not going to tell you the earth is round, but at the time of this discovery, I was, the earth's flat, the earth's flat, the earth's flat. I then started looking at it in a different context. This was a lie. This was a big lie, and this was kind of a red pill. And I actually felt if people could get their heads round the fact that through observational constraints, my own observation of what's going on, looking at perspective as well, a ship in the horizon's disappeared and you get a telescope or binoculars and you can focus into it and it suddenly comes up. All that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, this has to be, not necessarily it's flat, but the working out on the brain, taking those onion layers out to try and really get to understand me, where I stood on this and how I felt about this. Because obviously, as when you're a child, the first thing you do when you go into school, certainly in the United Kingdom, is there's a round ball map of the world. And when you watch TV, all the television programs show you a round globe in the opening sequences of most films back in the day. I mean, it's everywhere. So again, it was a kind of a case of looking at myself and trying to understand how I felt about it. Not necessarily that I'd proven something or I'd got over something. It was just like, I need to get my head round this as in the personal and understand it in the personal. And again, that probably took another year after that. But I did understand that this was a red pill, and if you could actually get your head round the fact that the shape of something that you've been told isn't necessarily the shape. Again, I'm not saying it's round, I'm not saying it's flat. I'm just saying if the shape of something you're told from birth fundamentally is different to your perception and your observation, then that takes some getting over that barrier, and it's a hurdle. And some people never will, and some people will, but obviously the way my brain works, it was like I knew it was a big one, but also wasn't sure that was the destination. I mean, obviously when I first realised, I was like, wow, I found it, I found the cure to the world, this is it. But it really wasn't. It was just a stepping stone. And you find this, that you get little eureka moments and things drop into place, but all it is a stepping stone to more knowledge, realising that the more you learn, the less you know or realise you know. It's a tiny proportion of what is out there, and we're only scratching the surface. So again, that was quite a big one, to understand that and take that step back mentally from what I'd kind of worked out. So the next thing that came across me some years later, and it was a good few years later, was the double slot experiment, where atoms are fired at a single plate. And so you had this machine that fires atoms at a solid plate with a slit in it, and the back wall is then observed. And obviously, as they fired these atoms, bang, 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 at this solid plate with a small slit in it, they got a line, a nice perfect line at the back, which is exactly what you would expect to see. So I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine, I understand that. So they then did the same experiment again fundamentally, but they did it without observing it. They didn't look at it. They just set the machine and disappeared and let it run. And when they got back, what they found is they had multiple lines down. So the first one was one line, and when they came back from not observing it, they had multiple lines going down the wall. Multiple lines. All nicely spaced out, multiple lines. And that had created something that they couldn't understand. So to try and get further into the experiment, they then put 2 slots to see what was going on, because in effect the first experiment had shown some kind of wave formation. So somehow something had interfered with itself, or that their things were bouncing around, or they weren't quite sure. So they upgraded the experiment to 2 slots, the double slit, and they fired and observed, and they got 2 clean lines. Great. So the first experiment's second part must have been an anomaly somehow. So then what they did is they went away and they set the machine off and it ran. And when they came back from not observing it, they had these lines down, and fundamentally it had caused a wave form. So it's a bit like mini rainbows upon rainbows upon rainbows. And sorry, the camera's not letting me move my hands. So when we got to the wall, you actually had multiple hits from the wave effect going through. Obviously when you watch the video, they explain it much easier than I do. But so when they observed it again, they got the lines. So then they decided to fire just one atom at a time and not observe it. And what they got was the waveform again, and the bit on the back wall again. And when they observed it again, they got the single line. But the thing is, they were firing one atom, and yet they were getting 2 lines at the back with the 2 slots. So what that fundamentally meant was the atom, though it was just one, could be in 2 locations at the same time and no locations at any time. And get your head around that one. So fundamentally, making it very, very simple, is when an atom was observed, it reacted differently to the unobserved atom. And an atom that has not been observed is in a state of flux. It's not one thing or another thing, it just is. And when you look at an atom, it makes it do something or create something or be something. So that was quite a big one. We've obviously seen the Matrix movies and such like, and so you're kind of looking at, well, that's really strange. My son's a gamer, I'm not, but he plays his games a lot, and it kind of struck me, and I got a little bit of a aha moment with this. And fundamentally, when you're playing a computer game, the program or the code shows you the scene that you're looking at, but beyond the square screen that we have here, there's nothing else exists, because you haven't looked at it yet on the computer game until you move around. And that was a bit of a, oh my god, the atoms work, or seem to appear to be, according to the science, to be working in the same way. Now, I actually kind of couldn't get my head around that at the time really fully, and so I put it on the back burner, like you would. It was then when I was watching a comedy program called The Big Bang Theory, when I still had a television, and something called Schrödinger's cat came up. Now, Erwin Schrödinger was a scientist, and he was a physicist, and he devised a thought experiment where you would place a cat inside a box with a vial of poison with a system of breaking that vial that could be at any time or not at all. And so you close the box, and the thought experiment was that the cat is both alive and dead at the same time in two states of matter almost. So it's both dead and alive until you open the box and observe, and at that point the cat is either dead or alive. But before the box is open, the cat is in two different states simultaneously, and it could be either or. Yeah, that was quite one as well. And so that then linked into the double slit experiment, where an atom had exactly the same properties, which then linked into the computer analogy, which was like curious and curiouser. So I think I was talking about this, or left it alone again really, and then more recently I was discussing this with my partner. This was probably a couple of 2.5 years ago, something like that, and she said, look, this just popped up on my feed, and it was Schrödinger again, but Schrödinger had actually done something called a wave equation, and he'd worked out the equation of the wave required for an atom or an electron, same kind of thing really. And so I actually started looking at that and realised that everything is in wave form. So when we see, sorry, it's going deep, I do apologise, and it's one to get your head round. But this is quite an interesting one to know the background of how we come to conclusions. It's not a quick fix. It takes a long while, and please do your own research and look at these things if you've got the mind to. But we have a waveform, so fundamentally everything is a wave. And this then led me on to understanding dimensional frequencies and how waveforms can affect the vibrational frequency of us, and how we would then potentially raise our frequency, and how then the Mandela effect kicks into all of that, which I'm not going to go into now because that's another one. But everything, please be aware that everything is connected to everything fundamentally. So this guy's come up with a theory on wave and how particles react in a wave form, which then went back to the wave of the double slit experiment, where when the particles weren't being absorbed, they were in a wave form. That's very interesting, I thought. So I sort of looked into it and tried to read the gumph and understand it. Watched a couple of videos and kind of got my head round what they were talking about. So as I've delved into this, I've been able to find other pictures and bits and pieces and diagrams of, but fundamentally, and then another analogy, because I do like my analogies, our heart is a waveform, and it produces a waveform, a field. And when they put electrodes on your body, it goes onto a graph, and the graph goes up, 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 like that. But actually, nothing is going up, 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 up as such. What's happening is you've got a wave. But because you're watching it in 2D, it can only show you the 2D version of. But actually, you've got a wave, a spiral, which is a Troidal field, which was another one of these aha moments. So when we look at anything on the screen that's going up and down, up and down, up and down in a graph system, it's actually a waveform moving forward, and all the graph can pick up is the up and down, up and down, up and down as it goes. If that makes sense, I hope it did. So I'm trying not to go too deep in this and explain it in a way. You may need to watch this video once or twice, to be fair. So what we had was a wave equation that connected to the double slot experiment, and proof that electrons or atoms followed a wave form. Now I was like, yeah, okay, but how does it do that? And I don't know, maybe a year ago, 8 months ago, we purchased some old books from the 1800s. Some of them it was a part collection of Encyclopedia Britannia. But there's also some other books which were science books of the time. They were like educational books, I would guess, that kind of thing. But far more advanced than we have today, I can assure you. There was a lot of information there, and I just happened to open one of these books, and the book fell open, and the book was talking about what scientists today would call fluid dynamics. And the book from this, I think it was from the 1880s or something, 1860s, 70s, it was an old book, stated that we lived in a fluid, and actually air is a fluid and water is a fluid, and so everything has a fluidity about it, which was okay. But if you actually think about it, and again, I like my analogies, if you've got a car engine with no oil in it, the car engine will seize up because there's no friction. Oh, sorry, there's too much friction. There's no slip and slide. There you go, technical term, slip and slide. So when you put oil in the car engine, it allows the parts to move against each other without sticking to each other and causing friction. And fluid dynamics explained how an atom can go through a waveform. So it's kind of no different than a dolphin swimming through the sea, or a fish swimming through the sea, or a bird flying in the sky. It's just different viscosities, different thicknesses or densities of the material, but fundamentally it all works the same, and it allows these atoms to move freely in sort of spirally effects, which is wonderful. So I'm going to stop that there at that point, because I think I've probably blown everybody's mind on where we're going. But please do look up what I've said, and I will put a couple of videos, short videos, just so you can try and understand what I'm talking about, and try and understand that everything is in a waveform. I then started looking at this more closely, and obviously we have many pictures of the heart with a toroidal field coming out, an energy form, but a toroidal field is drawn as a round us, but actually it's a waveform. And I was like, okay, well, if we are a toroidal field within us, have a toroidal field within us, what else has a toroidal field? And it turned out that trees do, all other animals, and I should know Mother Gaia. And I think this toroidal field is picked up by the Schumann resonance. It's a way of measuring the toroidal field energy fluctuation, is my kind of understanding of that. I could be wrong, but in basics that's what we're looking at. We then go to other people talking about their seeings and understandings of this on other videos. Sonia from the Tree of Knowledge talks about the cosmic egg, and we're on the side of the cosmic egg of a cosmic egg, and the 8 infinity sign that we see so much everywhere is actually a toroidal field. It's just a cross section of a toroidal field. And so I started to put all this kind of stuff together in my head, like I do, and I came with the science of such like that we're actually inside a troidal field of consciousness and energy, and it's a self-replicating kind of system. I know Richard has kind of briefly spoken about it on his channel, Richard Cardinal, and he's of the same opinion, and it resonates with him from source, that we're in a troidal field of energy, of consciousness, and this energy and consciousness of the troidal field gives us the impression of a real physical world. Now, you're going to say, that's a big step, Gary. But when we watch a program like Star Trek, and I know programs are just programs, but often there is a little bit of disclosure in these. In Star Trek, they had something called a holodeck, and they could create any kind of simulation that they wanted, and have the experience of, so rock climbing or whatever, and they would be climbing up a mountain face, but actually they were inside a holodeck, and they weren't anywhere at all really, particularly apart from inside a computer generated reality. And this is what we see in the Matrix films as well. We have a computer generated reality in which the mind goes into and leaves the body outside, and the mind cannot see the difference or understand the difference between the reality outside and the reality inside. So I think as it's getting to half an hour just over on that one, I'm going to leave it there, because I think a part 2 could be needed so it doesn't get too long. But fundamentally, whether it's flat or round makes no difference. What you perceive it to be, it will be, because of the matrix giving you what you want to see. And we'll go more into that, which kind of links into my Matrix Mindfulness series that I started doing a while ago. We can then kind of tie it all in together, hopefully. So I'm going to stop there, and hopefully your heads haven't exploded too much on this one as we move forward, because I still need to talk to you about neutrinos and how they work, and if you Google neutrinos, they won't give you an answer, as if they don't do anything magically, but they're all connected. And so I can then hopefully give you more of my understanding of where we are and what's going on in the realm. So there we go. So a big thank you to everybody who managed to get through the end of that one. Now a couple of little messages and updates. I do them at the end so that those people that switched off, well, sorry, but I should be doing a live with Meten of Platonic Planes on Friday. It didn't happen through to scheduling previously, but hopefully this Friday we'll be able to get that going. We're hoping for around 7-8 o'clock UK time. When I know more and we can pin it down a bit better, I'll let you know. Obviously the time differences of them going into British, or them going into the summertime, not British summertime because they're not in Britain, and us still in our winter time mode, means the times have changed slightly. But we're going to hopefully do a live, and that'll be the part 2 of the deep discussion, which kind of leads off this a bit, but in a deeper way. So that should be happening. Thank you very much for all the comments and loves and likes from the family, my mama bears. Thank you very much, as Richard would say, for the Rocking Pandora's box series that we do, It's a lot of fun, and we next week should be a cracking show again. And thank you very much for all the comments and all the bits that we get from that. I really do appreciate it. I kind of think that's about it really at the moment. So thank you very much, everybody, because I'm now waffling and you don't want to hear that. And I'll say goodbye, and there will be a part 2 to this coming up, where I start putting all the bits and pieces together, hopefully in a way that you can understand. So love, light and blessings, everybody. Bye bye.